Think of that. Remove tens of thousands of illegal alien gang members, drug dealers, murderers, child predators, human traffickers, fraudsters, and savage criminals.
3:17 a.m., February 19th, 2025. Federal Plaza, downtown Chicago, Illinois. Behind reinforced glass doors and beyond civilian clearance zones, the emergency operations room of the FBI's Chicago field office is alive with activity that has not been seen in decades. Over 200 federal agents from the FBI, DEA, and ICE stand, assembled in tactical formation, body armor fastened, night vision equipment calibrated, breach charges secured. Outside, the temperature hovers at 12 degrees Fahrenheit, but inside this command center, the atmosphere burns with a single mission objective that has taken 9 months of undercover surveillance, digital forensics, and informant testimony to reach this moment. The target is not a single warehouse or a cartel safe house. The target is an entire city corridor that has been engineered, protected, and weaponized by someone who was elected to serve the people of Chicago. Tonight, the federal government is moving to dismantle what investigators are calling the most sophisticated urban cartel route in the history of the Midwest, a network that has pushed over 400 kilograms of cocaine, 2.3 million fentanyl pills, and 170 kilograms of methamphetamine through the heart of Chicago every single month for the past 3 years. And the man who made it all possible sits in an office at City Hall with a nameplate on his desk and a voting record on public safety reform. This is not a story about street-level crime. This is a story about institutional betrayal at the highest level of municipal government. And what you are about to hear will show you exactly how deep the rot goes. 4:32 a.m., West Side Chicago, Humboldt Park neighborhood. The streets are frozen and silent under a low fog that clings to apartment buildings and corner stores like a blanket soaked in diesel fumes and dead neon light. A fleet of black Suburbans rolls slowly down West Division Street with headlights off, engines barely audible, moving like predators through the urban darkness. Behind them, 2 armored SWAT trucks and an ICE tactical unit follow in tight formation. They are converging on 6 locations simultaneously, all of them identified through months of tracking, encrypted cell signals, offshore wire transfers, and cartel informants who finally broke under federal pressure after seizures in Arizona and Texas cut off their supply lines. The first target is a 3-story brick building that officially operates as a private social club. Unofficially, it is the main distribution fortress for the Mexican cartel's Chicago operation, a facility where cocaine bricks are repackaged into smaller bundles, where fentanyl pills are pressed using industrial equipment smuggled in from Sinaloa, and where money is counted, stacked, and prepared for transfer back across the border through a labyrinth of shell companies and fake logistics firms. At exactly 4:35 a.m., the breach begins. Flashbangs detonate in sequence, shattering windows and sending blinding white light through every floor of the building. FBI agents in black tactical gear pour through the front entrance and side doors simultaneously, their voices cutting through the chaos with sharp commands in English and Spanish. Inside, cartel operatives scramble in panic, some reaching for weapons, others grabbing duffel bags filled with cash and trying to bolt toward back exits that have already been sealed by ICE agents. Gunfire erupts on the second floor, brief but intense, ending when a cartel enforcer drops his pistol and surrenders with his hands raised above his head. Within 12 minutes, the building is secured. Agents move through rooms stacked floor to ceiling with narcotics. They find 218 kilograms of cocaine in vacuum-sealed bricks, 87 kilograms of methamphetamine stored in industrial drums, and over 600,000 fentanyl pills pressed into counterfeit prescription tablets designed to look like Xanax and Percocet. They find 4 money-counting machines still warm from use, $7 million in cash bundled in rubber bands and stuffed into black garbage bags, and 14 cartel members zip-tied and lined against the wall with their faces pressed to cold concrete. But what agents find in the basement changes everything. Behind a false wall panel disguised as electrical infrastructure, investigators discover a steel-reinforced server room, climate-controlled and secured with biometric locks. Inside are 3 high-capacity hard drives, encrypted communications logs, and financial ledgers that trace transactions across 17 states and 4 countries. And buried within those files is a name that makes every agent in the room go silent. Councilman Richard Vasquez, Ward 14 Representative, City of Chicago. His digital signature is embedded in cartel logistics approvals. His encrypted authorization codes are linked to shipping manifests for drug tunnels running beneath industrial zones. And his personal offshore accounts show wire transfers totaling $11.4 million over the past 31 months. Payments disguised as consulting fees from fake construction firms and nonprofit organizations that exist only on paper. This is not negligence. This is not oversight. This is engineered collusion at the command level of city government. And what they are about to uncover in the next phase will prove that Councilman Vasquez did not just enable the cartel, he rebuilt the entire infrastructure of Chicago's west and south sides to serve as a permanent fortress for their operations. 6:53 a.m., FBI Cyber Forensics Division, Federal Plaza. Analysts sit hunched over glowing monitors in a darkened room, running decryption software on the seized hard drives pulled from the Humboldt Park fortress. The first files crack open at 7:11 a.m., revealing a master network diagram labeled Operation Midwest Nexus. It is a digital map of Chicago and the surrounding Midwest corridor, marked with over 190 red nodes representing cartel-controlled properties, transit hubs, storage facilities, human trafficking safe houses, and migrant smuggling routes that stretch from Chicago through Gary, Indiana, into Detroit, Michigan, and down into Indianapolis and St. Louis. Each node is connected by encrypted communication lines and tied to shell companies with names like Heartland Logistics Group, Great Lakes Construction Solutions, and Midwest Community Development Fund. Every single one of these entities is fake. They exist only to move money, to disguise shipments, and to provide legal cover for cartel infrastructure. But the most damning discovery is not the map itself, it is the approval chain embedded in the file metadata. Every major cartel expansion in Chicago over the past 3 years, every zoning variance that allowed cartel-controlled businesses to open in residential neighborhoods, every delayed police response in high-traffic drug zones, every reassignment of honest officers who got too close to the truth, all of it traces back to authorizations signed or influenced by Councilman Richard Vasquez. Investigators find encrypted emails between Vasquez and cartel leadership discussing shipment schedules, describing law enforcement patrol grids, and coordinating the timing of city construction projects to provide cover for underground tunnel expansions. They find voice memos recorded on burner phones, where Vasquez refers to the cartel's Chicago operation as our enterprise and discusses profit projections like a corporate executive planning quarterly earnings. One senior FBI analyst leans back in his chair and says it out loud for the first time. This is not corruption. This is partnership. Vasquez did not just take bribes, he became the cartel's chief operating officer for the entire Midwest corridor. He turned his political office into a command center for narcotics distribution, human trafficking logistics, and migrant smuggling coordination. He used his authority to shield cartel members from prosecution, to reassign investigations, and to ensure that federal agencies were always one step behind. And the scale of what he built is staggering. Over the past 3 years, this network has moved an estimated 14 tons of cocaine, 6 tons of methamphetamine, and over 8 million fentanyl pills into American communities, generating cartel revenues exceeding $240 million. The human cost is incalculable. Overdose deaths in Chicago's west and south sides have risen by 34% since Vasquez took office. Families have been destroyed, neighborhoods have been hollowed out, and every single life lost can be traced back to a system that was deliberately engineered to prioritize cartel profit over public safety. But the operation is not over. In fact, it has only just begun. And what happens next will shake Chicago's political establishment to its core. 8:47 a.m., Unified Federal Command Center, O'Hare International Airport Perimeter. A digital wall map lights up with 190 pulsing red markers spread across Chicago, Cook County, and surrounding regions in Illinois, Indiana, and Wisconsin. Each marker represents a confirmed cartel asset identified through the Operation Midwest Nexus files. Standing before this map are over 1,000 federal agents assembled from FBI field offices across the Midwest, DEA tactical units, ICE enforcement divisions, and DHS special operations teams. Overhead, 6 Black Hawk helicopters warm their rotors on the tarmac, ready to provide aerial surveillance and rapid insertion support. Armored response vehicles line the access roads, engines idling, agents inside reviewing digital raid packets on ruggedized tablets. This is the largest coordinated federal operation in Illinois state history, and the mission objective is total eradication of the cartel network that Councilman Vasquez spent 3 years building. At exactly 900 hours, the operation launches. Simultaneous raids hit cartel properties across 6 counties in a single coordinated strike. In Chicago's Little Village neighborhood, SWAT teams breach a 2-story warehouse disguised as a furniture import business, finding a methamphetamine super lab capable of producing 40 kilograms per week, complete with industrial ventilation systems and chemistry equipment imported directly from cartel suppliers in Mexico. In South Shore, agents storm a luxury condo used as a human trafficking transit house, rescuing 11 women and 4 minors who were being held against their will and prepared for transport to other cities along the cartel's Midwest corridor. In Gary, Indiana, just across the state line, DEA agents seize a cartel-controlled trucking depot where narcotics were hidden inside fake cargo shipments labeled as agricultural equipment, recovering 360 kilograms of cocaine and 97 kilograms of heroin. In Cicero, Illinois, ICE agents raid a network of sham businesses, including a car wash, a check-cashing store, and a taco restaurant, all of them functioning as money laundering fronts that processed over $18 million in cartel cash over the past 18 months. And beneath an industrial park in Berwyn, Illinois, investigators discover something that confirms their worst fears. A fully operational drug tunnel, 8 feet high and nearly 400 meters long, running from a cartel-controlled warehouse to a connection point beneath a legitimate shipping facility operated by a company that was awarded a city contract under Councilman Vasquez's direct recommendation. The tunnel is reinforced with concrete, equipped with lighting and ventilation, and contains rail carts used to move narcotics in bulk. Agents estimate that this tunnel alone moved over 2 tons of cocaine and methamphetamine per month, completely bypassing street-level enforcement and allowing the cartel to operate with industrial efficiency inside one of America's largest cities. By 2:30 p.m., the results are staggering. Federal agents have seized over 900 kilograms of cocaine, 412 kilograms of methamphetamine, 2.1 million fentanyl pills, 673 firearms including military-grade assault rifles and explosives, $34 million in cash, and 72 vehicles used for cartel transport and enforcement operations. They have arrested 147 cartel operatives, including regional lieutenants, enforcers, chemists, smugglers, and financial coordinators. And most importantly, they have dismantled 190 cartel-controlled properties, businesses, and transit nodes that form the backbone of the Mexican cartel's Midwest empire. One federal agent standing in the ruins of the Berwyn Tunnel says it plainly to a news camera that will broadcast his words across the nation. The underworld took more damage in 12 hours than it has taken in the last 12 years. But this is not the end. This is just the beginning of accountability. 4:17 p.m. Chicago Police Department Internal Affairs Division, headquarters downtown. While federal agents are still processing evidence from the raids, a parallel investigation is unfolding inside the very institution that was supposed to protect the city. Seized cartel servers contain personnel files, patrol schedules, and payment ledgers that reveal the depth of corruption within Chicago's own law enforcement and municipal government. Over the past 3 years, Councilman Vasquez used his political influence and cartel money to compromise key officials across multiple departments. Investigators identify 19 Chicago police officers who accepted monthly payments ranging from $4,000 to $12,000 to provide advance warning of raids, to falsify patrol reports in high-traffic drug zones, and to delay responses to cartel violence. They find records of 6 assistant city attorneys who buried prosecution files and dismissed cases against cartel members in exchange for offshore payments disguised as legal consultation fees. They discover that 4 zoning board officials were paid to approve cartel-front businesses and to fast-track permits for properties later used as drug labs, trafficking houses, and smuggling hubs. But the most shocking revelation comes from communication logs between Vasquez and senior officials in the Chicago Transit Authority. Text messages and encrypted emails show that Vasquez coordinated with cartel leadership to manipulate public transit schedules and maintenance windows, creating deliberate coverage gaps that allowed cartel couriers to move narcotics and cash through subway stations and bus terminals without surveillance. Investigators find footage from seized cartel cameras showing CTA workers, some of them supervisors, actively assisting in the loading and unloading of drug shipments during off-peak hours in exchange for cash payments delivered in plain envelopes. Inside the Internal Affairs conference room, honest officers who dedicated their careers to protecting Chicago neighborhoods sit in stunned silence as the evidence unfolds. One veteran sergeant with 23 years on the force breaks down, his voice shaking with rage and grief. He says that he and his team spent years chasing leads and making arrests, only to watch cases disappear, evidence go missing, and suspects walk free within hours. He says he always suspected something was wrong, but he never imagined the corruption reached this high, that it was this organized, that it was engineered from the top down by an elected official who stood in front of cameras and talked about public safety while secretly running a second police force loyal only to the cartel. Federal investigators make it clear that what they have uncovered is not a series of isolated incidents. It is a parallel enforcement system, a shadow government within Chicago's municipal structure, built and controlled by Councilman Vasquez to serve the interests of the Mexican cartel. And every officer, every official, every bureaucrat who participated in this system will face federal charges. The badge will be rebuilt, but first it must be cleansed. 7:32 p.m., FBI Field Office, Federal Plaza. Agents lay out printed maps and financial flowcharts across a conference table that stretches the length of the room. What they are seeing now is the continental scale of Operation Midwest Nexus, the full scope of the infrastructure that Councilman Vasquez helped the cartel build across the American heartland. The Chicago corridor was never meant to be the end. It was meant to be the center, the hub of a distribution network that stretched across 17 states and connected to cartel supply lines running through Texas, Arizona, and California. Seized logistics files show that cartel shipments moved from Chicago into Detroit, where they fed markets across Michigan and Ohio. They moved into Indianapolis, supplying networks throughout Indiana and Kentucky. They moved into St. Louis, feeding distribution cells across Missouri and Arkansas. And they moved into Milwaukee, supplying routes that stretched all the way into Minnesota and the Dakotas. The system was designed with corporate precision. Fake trucking companies with legitimate DOT numbers and falsified safety records moved narcotics disguised as agricultural products, construction materials, and industrial equipment. Cartel-controlled warehouses were strategically placed near interstate highway junctions, allowing rapid redistribution without triggering law enforcement checkpoints. Way stations along key routes were infiltrated by cartel informants who provided advance warning when inspections were scheduled, allowing convoys to delay or reroute. And shipping manifests were altered using corrupted customs brokers and freight forwarders who were paid to ensure that cartel cargo moved through the system invisibly. Investigators estimate that this network moved over 40 tons of cocaine, 18 tons of methamphetamine, and 23 million fentanyl pills across the Midwest over the past 3 years, generating cartel revenues exceeding $1.2 billion. And the human toll is beyond measure. Every city touched by this network has seen overdose deaths rise, gang violence escalate, and communities destabilized. Families have buried children who died from fentanyl poisoning. Parents have lost sons and daughters to addiction pipelines fed by cartel methamphetamine. Neighborhoods have been torn apart by violence as local gangs fought for control of distribution territories supplied by the cartel's Midwest operation. But the final discovery is the one that makes federal prosecutors realize they are not just dismantling a drug network, they are stopping a hostile takeover of American municipal infrastructure. Buried in the deepest encrypted files on Vasquez's server is a strategic plan labeled Phase 3 Consolidation. It outlines the cartel's long-term vision for the Midwest corridor, a vision where they do not just operate within American cities, but control them. The plan calls for expanding political influence by identifying and recruiting additional city council members, mayors, and county officials in key Midwest cities. It calls for embedding cartel operatives within law enforcement academies, ensuring that future officers are pre-compromised before they even take the badge. It calls for acquiring legitimate businesses, real estate, and financial institutions to create a permanent economic base that cannot be seized or dismantled. And it calls for using migrant smuggling and human trafficking operations to generate blackmail material on public officials, ensuring long-term compliance and silence. This was never about quick profits or short-term operations. This was about building a shadow state, a parallel government structure loyal to the cartel, embedded within the heart of the American Midwest, designed to operate indefinitely without detection or interference. And Councilman Richard Vasquez was the architect. One federal prosecutor closes the file and speaks the words that will define this case for years to come. This is not crime. This is conquest. And we just stopped it. 9:53 p.m. Chicago City Hall downtown. Under the glare of television cameras and surrounded by federal agents, Councilman Richard Vasquez is escorted out of his office in handcuffs. His face is pale, his suit wrinkled, his eyes fixed on the ground as reporters shout questions he will never answer. Behind him, FBI agents carry boxes of evidence seized from his office, including laptops, encrypted phones, financial records, and handwritten notes that will form the foundation of a federal indictment charging him with racketeering, conspiracy to distribute narcotics, money laundering, obstruction of justice, and domestic terrorism for his role in facilitating cartel operations on American soil. He will face trial in federal court, where prosecutors will present over 9 months of evidence showing how he turned his elected position into a command center for one of the most sophisticated cartel networks in U.S. history. If convicted, he faces life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. But justice for Councilman Vasquez is only one part of this story. The real victory is measured in the 190 cases saved, the 190 cartel properties, businesses, and operations dismantled before they could claim more lives. It is measured in the families who will not receive the phone call that their son overdosed on fentanyl pressed in a cartel lab and distributed through Vasquez's network. It is measured in the neighborhoods that will slowly begin to heal now that the infrastructure of violence and addiction has been ripped out by its roots. And it is measured in the message sent to every corrupt official, every compromised politician, every public servant who believes they can betray their community for cartel money. The federal government is watching, and when the evidence is strong enough, the hammer will fall. This story is not an isolated incident, it is a warning. Organized crime does not always announce itself with violence in the streets or bodies in the river. Sometimes it wears a suit. Sometimes it sits in an office with a nameplate and a voting record. Sometimes it hides behind the language of public service while engineering the destruction of the very communities it was elected to protect. Power does not always need guns and threats. Sometimes it only needs silence and ambition. And in that silence, empires are built, lives are destroyed, and democracy itself is hollowed out from within. The cost of this betrayal is measured in human lives. It is measured in the 12-year-old girl in South Shore who died from a fentanyl overdose after taking a pill she thought was a painkiller, a pill pressed in a cartel lab that operated because Councilman Vasquez ensured the police never raided it. It is measured in the mother in Little Village who buried her son after he was killed in gang violence, fueled by cartel methamphetamine that flooded her neighborhood because Vasquez rerouted patrols away from distribution zones. It is measured in the families across 17 states who lost children, parents, siblings, and friends to an addiction crisis deliberately engineered for profit by a network that could only exist because an elected official chose cartel money over the lives of the people who trusted him. If you are still watching this story, tap like so more people see what really happened in Chicago. Share this video so the truth reaches every corner of this country. Comment expose if you want corruption like this dragged into the light and held accountable. Because stories like this do not spread unless people like you make them spread. And the only way we stop this from happening again is by refusing to let it be forgotten. This story is a fictional dramatization inspired by real issues facing American cities, But the warning it carries is very real. Corruption at the highest levels of government is not a conspiracy theory. It is a documented reality that requires constant vigilance, fearless journalism, and citizens who refuse to look away when power betrays the public trust. The federal agents who dismantled Operation Midwest Nexus did their job. Now the rest of us must do ours. We must demand accountability. We must support honest law enforcement. And we must never forget that democracy dies in silence, but it is reborn every time someone refuses to stay quiet. Chicago will recover, the Midwest corridor will heal, and the 190 cases saved will stand as proof that when institutions are compromised, there are still people willing to fight back. This is not the end of the story. This is the beginning of accountability. And every person watching this video is part of that beginning.